You're listening to the Coop Homeschool Podcast.
This is your podcast for community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling. I'm Mandy.
I'm Jessica.
And this is The Coop.
Today we're talking about deschooling.
Oh, I'm excited.
I know, it's a big one, but it's going to be, we're simplifying it. So it's just this one little topic here. Mm-hmm. But it feels so good to be back after the holidays.
I know, we took quite the break.
Yes, which was good.
I missed you.
I know, I've been missing this.
I bet people missed us too.
I'm sure. You've really been missing that intro, huh? So before we dive in, Mandy, what'd you do? Or what?
Okay, well, I'm just gonna give one thing that we did that I was super excited about. So we did an Elf Day, the movie The Elf. And so we read the Arctic Challenge, an Usborne book. I'm holding it up. And that was really cool. I learned a lot about the Arctic that way and surviving in the Arctic. And it's a little goofy and silly, but a quick read. And I read it out loud. And while I did that, they played with a cinnamon Play-Doh and then cut it into things. And we baked it. And they now had stars of cinnamon Play-Doh to gift to people, and it was fun,
like a little ornament.
Yeah, and we did like orange cloves, but I had them design a toy. I had them learn about narwhals and Arctic animals. We watched the Planet episode. We just for breakfast, of course, we had pasta with syrup and candy, and they got to make their own buffet of candy pasta. It was disgusting.
Yeah,
and but it was a really fun day. And then we watched Elf, and we wore Christmas clothes, and it was really fun. It was a really great memory making, and I feel like we could do one every year with different books and different focuses. Yeah. Oh, our New York book was phenomenal.
That's awesome.
I'll probably want to use that again because it's like a choose your own adventure New York picture book. Yeah, and it's just a picture book though, and you go throughout New York City, and so we only explored like 1/4 of the sites.
Yeah. So
it was a really fun day. What about you? What's your scoop?
Well, the holidays were quite the doozy. We had a lot of family. We did a lot of hosting, and then we got a lot of sick. It started off with a cold, and then we ended up getting the other thing I won't say out loud, but
the C word.
The C word. But it wasn't that bad, and we survived, and we're all healthy now. Yeah. But it was definitely this wild. I was looking forward to this vacation, and then just like got sick, canceled one thing, and then canceled the next thing, and so it wasn't quite the holiday I had hoped for. But we spent a lot of time together, and that was really, really special, and just really took a break from all the things, because we run around a lot. Yeah. So getting back into our routine has been a little rough the last week and a half, but we're getting there.
Yeah, I feel like the last time I saw you, other than this week, was it since this? Yeah, the last time I saw you was our Coop group. Our co-op goes to Italy. Yeah, where we made pasta and learned Italian together and presented inventions like Leonardo da Vinci and.
Yeah, that was the week before Christmas.
I think. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah,
so it was a long holiday in that sense. Several weeks went by, and then all of a sudden, here we are. Yeah, so it's good to be back.
It's so fun.
Yes. So we want to talk about deschooling, which is what we highly recommend as being the first thing that you do when you've either chosen to homeschool for the first time or are pulling your children out of public government schooling. So deschooling is just the term for the process of ridding yourself of the thought and the structure of public education.
Which is so hard to do because we were brought up in it, most of us.
Right. Those of us who were raised in public schools, it really just becomes your whole idea. I mean, everywhere you go, you see depictions of public schooling. Mm-hmm. All the movies, all the books that you read, mm-hmm. That's just a common experience that people around the world seem to share. Mm-hmm. And so it's this big thing that we just really have our mind set on. And set on as being the standard.
And it's a common priority in every family. You don't skip school for anything.
No.
And so changing that mindset and I hate to call it the idol of education, but that is the majority of a child's life is their schooling.
Right. So deschooling is really the challenge of thinking about it differently and thinking about education outside of the structure of public schooling and government-funded schooling.
Yeah, and people don't even realize they actually have a mindset about schooling.
Right, because we've accepted it as the way that it's done.
Exactly, yeah.
So this is a little bit, we're not going to get too crazy about it, but this is definitely one of those times where you're like questioning, well, who set that standard? Who decided that this is the one way that education is done? And maybe it doesn't work well. And we've all heard about Montessori and, other types of learning, but usually those are considered very fringy.
Yeah, like Waldorf, you really only hear of that for the younger, and even Montessori for the younger kids.
Exactly, because then we all figure out that this is the one way to go, and it's really not. And it's really important, especially choosing to homeschool, that you at least know that you can do it completely different. And so the first thing I want to bring up is this book. It's called Deschooling Society. I'm showing a picture of it. It's this cute, tiny little book by an Austrian philosopher, Ivan Illich.
Well, and it meets my prerequisite of being a half an inch in order to read a book.
But it's a little dense. If you look at the pages, there's not a lot of white space. It's all
and the font is
type.
small.
Yes, it is. I need my glasses here. But the premise of this book, when he wrote this in 1970, was more about disestablishing schools and defunding them and urging the educational system to reform, and that this system isn't working. It works for some, not for all, and maybe we need to find a different way. So that's a little bit more what this book is, but he's the one who coined the term deschooling. And then he and John Holt were friends. And John Holt is a former public educator turned homeschooling advocate who literally wrote books like How to Teach Your Children at Home. Those are his books. I have this one with me today, Teach Your Own by John Holt. And in here, he talks about how he and Ivan Illich had these conversations about deschooling, and he considered himself, John Holt, to be more of the tactician. And so he thinks that the deschooling term could be a little bit confusing. So he came up with unschooling, which in 2022 has a lot different connotations than it did when he coined the term in 1977. And so he created this term to really mean doing things outside of the public school. So doing it differently. And that's still kind of how I like to think of unschooling. And so when I say that I'm an unschooler, that's really kind of what I mean is I'm not adhering to a philosophy of schooling in the sense where we don't touch curriculum. We do everything anti-public school.
Right.
I just don't use that as my frame of reference when I make the decisions that I do.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So I think if you really just think of it that way, unschooling can be synonymous with deschooling. It's the idea that education does not need to look the way that public school does. But this is a big thing to break our minds of, and that's why it's a process.
And you'll see people on Facebook groups when they say, "Oh, what should I do first?" People will start saying deschool, deschool, deschool. Right. And so this is an effort to help you understand what deschooling means.
So we're going to break it down just a little bit further and somewhat briefly. I thought we'd jump into first structure. So when you think of school, what do you think of as far as like a day? What does your day look like when you think of school?
Are you asking me?
Sure.
Oh.
Yeah. I know it's
Do you want
hard.
the right answer?
I want the answer of like when you close your eyes and you think about it. When someone says, "What does your school day look like?" Like what do you picture?
Right. So, immediately I can think of desks because that is how I'm trained to think. But then if I think of it for a second longer, it's outside playing in the leaves, which my kids don't play in leaves.
Right. No.
but it's the idea that we're outside doing stuff. And now snap circuits come to mind.
Right.
And so just different things that aren't in the school. But the first initial thing is always like, oh, we're going to do school, which means we're going to go sit at a table.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that that's really common. As soon as I hear school, I think of the classroom. I think of a learning room, an environment that's set up for teaching specific subjects. I think of the idea of like going through multiple subjects. You know, it's not just free play. It's not a free for all. I think of structure, and I think of, you know, it being led by an adult towards children and that sort of thing. And I think it takes years of training, even in your mind. You know, you still picture that scenario first, but now you can very quickly go, oh no, but I don't do that.
Right.
You know, a school could look like anything.
Well, and I only broke down and got desks 2 years ago because
Right.
they were getting older and they wanted their own space.
Exactly.
Normally we just sat around basically what used to be our breakfast table.
Right.
We would just sit around that, and I did have a whiteboard next to it. But then I did realize, they want their own drawers. They want their own space to do their own thing. But now that is my picture of schooling.
Right.
Yeah,
I know.
it's funny.
And that's the thing, is that you don't need to be anti-school or pro-school.
Right.
You know, the idea is just that home education just needs to be what fits for you and not need to follow a specific mold.
Right.
So it's okay if you have desks.
I know. And I think what happened when I hear people immediately pulling their kids out of school, the first thing they go do though is make sure they have a desk and their workbooks all lined up.
Right.
And that's when I want to get in there and say, wait,
Right.
don't do that yet.
Back up.
Yeah. Like slow down. You don't now just have to bring the government school home or the traditional school home. Do you know that? Like that's my worry, is that they don't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. My kids have desks, but we don't actually sit at them for learning. They're more just their tables for doing independent projects. And then when we gather to do learning, we gather at my table.
Yeah, it's nice to look at each other when you're talking
and show them
and have the
pictures.
kids look at each other too, versus all facing the same way.
Right. And what am I going to do? Stand in front of their desks?
Yeah, but you do see a lot of homeschoolers setting up that way.
Right.
And I'm always wondering, like, how the kids feel. Do they like that setup? Is that what they want?
Right.
Or is that just what they're used to? Or would they prefer to be shoulder to shoulder, like we are sitting here doing the podcast? Or would they like to face each other and see what because I don't consider it cheating when my son looks at my daughter's work and sees like, oh, that's how you do it. And then does it.
Learning.
It's learning, like it's just another form of teaching.
Right. August has to climb in my lap.
Yeah.
I spend most of the time saying, can you stay in your own seat? But he's like, no, I'll snuggle you. And he gets all up in here.
So cute.
But those are the moments that are going to be gone. He's
Totally.
4. It's not going to happen much longer.
I know when Maisie, my 7-year-old, gets up on my lap, she has broad shoulders. I'm like, okay, well now I can't see what I'm telling you guys.
Move your head.
And she'll be like, fine. And then she'll get off and then she's all sad. But I'm like, well, I couldn't see. Yeah.
Sorry. Snuggle time will be later.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So anyway, then there's the structure of what you imagine teaching to look like. You know, and so we kind of touched on that. Do you want to be a lecturer in front of your students, you know, in front of your children? Or are you reading together? What are you doing?
Or a variety of it all, like different modalities, different sensory experiences. And then, you know, all those have merit to it.
Of course.
Yeah, but when I think of school, going back to that picture, I think of a teacher at a board.
Yep. Lecture style.
Yeah, lecture style the whole time. Right. Basically.
Yeah, same. And then, so I've said it already, but the education doesn't need to fit a specific mold. So it just takes time to really get rid of what we picture and some of the stereotypes of school and think about what it is that we are trying to provide our students. So for our children, do we need structure? Are they a child that needs more structure? Then your day might be structured, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not. Or maybe it's structured in a different way.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't need to be structured like it's morning time, it's recess, it's, you know, this subject and that subject. You can have more fluidity, but maybe you do need to say, I know that my kid has to take a break after an hour or we're going to lose it. We just don't have to finish a certain subject by then. Who cares?
Yeah.
You can work on math all day.
Yeah, I mean, it would part of deschooling then be just trying different things, not being set and saying like, okay, one day we're going to take a break every 15 minutes or they're going to put things in order the way they want to do it and see what school week they plan or
exactly. Yeah, you never know. So I want to move into content. So this is another really tricky one. And I know a lot of people who start the homeschooling journey and they immediately think of, what curriculum do I buy? You know, they think there's something that they're supposed to be doing. And this is the part that gets a lot of newbies really overwhelmed, because some of us will be like, whatever you want.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not a helpful answer.
Yeah,
and I
it's
know.
not, yeah.
We try not to be that people.
But it is fun to say.
But it is fun to say, because there doesn't need to be any particular standard for content. Now, there are standards, and we discuss those much more in depth in episode 40, Educational Gaps. And we talk about how the standards are there, and they can be a great resource if you do want to know what's typical for this age. A lot of the standards are done developmentally appropriately. So some of the language arts and other skills are presented at developmentally appropriate times, which can be a helpful baseline. You know, maybe you don't want to teach, you know, whatever at 6 years old, and you want to wait till 10 like the state standards say. That's fine. But at the same time, I don't think that the state standards are something that have to be adhered to.
And they don't know your child.
And they don't know
and
your
their
child.
Interests.
Right. And it's our favorite question to say, you know, like, why does it matter if you learn about sedimentary rocks in 3rd grade or 7th grade? You know what I mean?
But they have to have that, because they have to make sure a certain amount of information is covered K through 12. And so if everyone's on the same page, but we don't have to do that.
We don't.
Yeah.
And if you know you're going to cover it, or it will be covered, then it doesn't matter if you teach it in 3rd grade.
Or you talk about rocks for 30 minutes, and if they seem interested, then you dive in.
Right. Exactly. But there's no need to have a whole curriculum set aside for these arbitrary things, which is really the root of what I believe homeschooling is finding the things that your kids are naturally interested in and helping pursue those.
Right.
But it can be really difficult if your brain can't get past what this state schools do, what the government schools do. You know, that's how we grew up. I grew up in 3rd grade, you learn this. In 4th grade, you learn that. In 5th grade, you do this. And that's what everyone in California did. You know, we all have this shared experience, which is kind of a cool thing.
It is, yeah.
But at the same time, it's arbitrary.
Yeah, and then you're worried about falling behind, or you want to get ahead. The achiever mom wants to get ahead and check all these things off with not as much regard for what their child wants to spend more time on.
Absolutely. And then we talk about this, I can't remember which episode now because I'm going off the cuff, but we talk about this in the switching subjects all the time. You wrote the blog post, Confinements of the School Bell.
Oh, yeah. I think that was our Dumbing Us Down.
Yeah, it was a Dumbing Us Down episode.
And how you're stuck. I think that's in book club episode 2, Dumbing Us Down, episode 57.
So in that one, we talk a lot about just how disconnected a lot of the learning in public education is, because the standards are so different and varied amongst subjects that you have to close your math book where you're learning fractions. Then you go to 5th grade social studies where you're learning about colonial America. Then you close that book and you go to science where you're doing something completely disconnected. Then language arts is something completely...
Yeah.
Where you could actually put together a lot more continuity in their learning by combining some of these things.
Well, we're learning about digestion in our human body. And so we talked about Florence Nightingale today, and it was in our curriculum. That's a homeschool curriculum. And so we got to learn about Florence Nightingale and typhoid and cholera. And then I said, hey, let's watch 1 or 2 little 3-minute YouTube videos about typhoid and Typhoid Mary. And then I observed them and they were interested, but then they didn't say, I want to see more about that. So, so I didn't even do the YouTubes about cholera, and we didn't discuss more about cholera because I could see, okay, infectious disease is not of interest to them in this moment. So we're going to move on. But if you aren't homeschooling, or if you're not deschooled enough, you'd be like, okay, now we need to study cholera because that's on the list. And now we need to write a report about it, but it's nothing they're super interested in.
You just get stuck checking boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what we have learned that we both really enjoy are the unit studies. And we have a whole episode on that as well. 29 maybe. If I'm just throwing out things.
It's 29, yeah.
Oh, yes,
Episode
nailed
29.
it.
Check that out.
But unit studies are so great because you can combine multiple subjects in one topic.
Which you can't really do in traditional school because it's not going to fit within their standards.
It's not going to fit within the standards unless they revise them because, again, they are pretty arbitrarily set. So you could revise the whole thing, right? Which is what Ivan Ilyich is saying, is that there's got to be a better way to do it.
Totally.
You know, and so I think unit studies would be such a neat thing if they could, because you could rewrite that and say, in third grade, we're going to do this. I mean,
and
again,
all these go together.
Right.
And
you lose the autonomy of letting children kind of lead by their interests, but at the same time, at least there's not a bunch of disconnect. You know, you don't have to say, okay, now put away your social studies book and we're getting out this book. It's all the same. It's all learning.
But as a homeschool parent, you are observing and seeing, like I was just mentioning about typhoid. Like if you saw that your daughter wasn't interested in oceans the second you started, then you know, okay, we're just going to spend a little bit of time on this and then I'll let her pick from here which animals she wants to study.
Exactly.
And then we're going to move on. And then I still have it. And in the future, if we need to circle back, I'll ask her to pick other animals we haven't done yet.
Right. Because here's the thing I want to make sure that we say before we move on, is that I think that there is a point in time where if your child is looking at higher education, so if your child is looking at a career that involves college or in general, they want to attend college, you will have to meet standards at some point. But that point is not early elementary, upper elementary, and even middle school.
Right.
You know, that point to check your boxes is high school.
Yeah.
And so if at that point they need to take oceanography because they didn't really care about it when they were in 5th grade, then you take your oceanography course, and guess what? They're going to do just fine because now they have motivation to learn that subject. Whereas now it's just arbitrary learning.
I mean, this is when they're, you know, age 13 and under. This is the fun time where you really can explore, as long as you're still developing their skills and growing their mind in a way that can solve problems and just critical thinking skills. As long as you're developing that, then the content can be what you want.
Absolutely.
So in deschooling, then, is it teaching your brain to do that? It like how is this related to deschooling? Like just coming to that realization?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
So deschooling, I would say, is just being able to think outside the box and be able to accept something that feels different, you know, and to be okay with doing things on your own timeline, for instance. So the putting off until high school, the things that you really feel like you have to check boxes, that's okay. There's no rule. There's no rule.
And when kids are ready to learn something, they will learn it faster.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. And then here's the other, we kind of touched on this, but when do you teach certain subjects? You know, so you don't have to be on anyone's timeline when you're homeschooling unless you choose to be. And then you can block teach. So if you want to work on just one subject at a time, you can for any length of time. You know, do you need to have a school year? You don't have to start and stop your school year at any given point. You can keep going. You can do it however you want. And that's kind of the very freeing idea is, you know, school doesn't have to happen in these little boxed off parameters.
And what's nice about deschooling, before you actually start your homeschool year or semester, if you pull them out in November, you can maybe finish whatever they're doing in December and then in January have a fresh start. It's to deschool before you actually get started, so you're not buying all this curriculum that then you're like, shoot, I already sunk all this money into this curriculum that is the same as the traditional school. So you want to kind of hold up and deschool yourself first. And really imagine and open your mind and think of your mission and why you're doing this and what you're doing.
The panic moment you have when you pull your kids out of school is, well, shoot, I got to keep doing what they were doing. But that's probably the thing you're pulling them out for, partially, in part. But it doesn't have to be that way, you know, so challenge yourself to think beyond that and what you can do. And then we have 3 tips to finish off this deschooling conversation.
Awesome.
Tip number 1, think about learning as being a constant process in your life. learning doesn't happen between 9 and 5. Learning doesn't happen Monday through Friday. Learning is a constant process. It's a question and an answer. And how do you get to that answer?
Yeah.
That's learning.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope to instill in my children is you should be constantly asking questions. When you don't know something, but the question comes up, go and find the answer.
Yeah. I mean, my daughter's wanting a bunny. And so when you got here today, you heard me talking about like, hey, you need to be researching the breeds, who's more affectionate, who likes cuddling. Right. And that's her interest. So she's going to go do that.
Definitely. And she wants to. And that's a great opportunity to encourage her to do that. And that's the thing. This was at 7 p.m. at night.
Yeah, exactly.
This didn't happen between school hours.
That's her science.
Exactly. Yeah. This is her science. This is her language arts because she's going to have to articulate these things.
Yeah, and I told her to take notes. Find one of your journals. She has all these journals. Right. And start taking notes. Project. And then I was saying cross-reference. If this is what you see online as the best breeds for affection, look up the Humane Society and see what the breeds they carry.
Right. Do they have them?
Cross over.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think that that's exactly right. And so when we think about learning as being something that's happening constantly around us with our children, there doesn't have to be formality to it. You're always learning. So stop stressing out about teaching and just learn.
And be willing to have your kids are used to, if they're in regular school, they're used to being instructed in a lot of their learning because they don't have the free time at home to figure out what they want to learn. And pursue that and what they're curious about. Because I remember that. I didn't have a lot of curiosities because I was just waiting
to be told.
Next.
Yeah.
And so you may need to have a couple weeks where you just say, what do you want to do today? How do you want to plan your day? What are you interested in doing? And just let go of all the other skills that they've been developing and just see what they do. Because I mean, my daughter's writing a book right now, and in editing it with her, she's getting, and I learned that from you because you were saying, so your daughter was doing that and a couple months ago. Yeah. And now I'm getting to do that. And I'm like, oh, compound sentences. Let me tell you what that is, because this is what you have here and you don't have the proper punctuation.
Right. But now we can do that.
And let's look up what the proper punctuation is for a compound sentence, because I can't say all the options. I just know comma and.
Right. Yeah.
But I know there's a semicolon in there you could use. You know, let's make sure we do it right. And then so it's just, and it's based on what she wants to be doing.
It's natural learning. Yeah. And it's beautiful to watch.
It is.
So then there's 3, which is kind of what you said, or tip number 2. Well, I'm going out of order, but I'm jumping because it segues beautifully, which is observe the learning happening. Yeah. So set a period of time that you want to be able to observe some learning, 2 weeks, a week, whatever you think. And just watch your child learn in their natural habitat.
Yeah.
What do they do? What do they seek out? What do they ask you? Like what things do you naturally do together?
Yeah. Yeah. What do they do outside?
Right. Put on a documentary. Yeah. Did they like it? Did they have more questions?
Force yourself to pull back and just see what they do.
Take notes. It's really fascinating because there's learning happening constantly. Did your child learn how to jump off of that rock that they used to be scared of? Well, what did they do? And think about all of those things and how you can maximize that into you're building their education at home.
And if they're having fun with sidewalk chalk, you could go out there and teach them hopscotch, and now they're practicing squares and rectangles and circles and yeah,
I agree. All right, and then the final one is don't compare your home education to government schooling. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's just really important. Be careful not to compare because it's not the same.
Yeah, no.
And public education is what it is.
Yeah,
it's fine. But if you're not choosing it, don't compare what you're doing at home because your model is completely different.
Yeah. And this is your opportunity.
Right. To be different. Yeah. To do it differently.
It's a huge gift to you. And then if you end up finding that the traditional model is what's best for you guys, then do that. But deschooling is all about pulling back and seeing what fits you and your child.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
All right. It's now time for the Coop Q A, where we answer your questions. If you have a question you want us to answer, head over to the podcast page on our website, thecoophomeschool.com, or email us, mamahens@thecoopHomeschool.com. What's our question, Mandy?
What is Outschool? So this question came up because my daughter was talking about how she's taking bunny care classes on Outschool. And one of our friends who's in her first year of homeschooling says, wait, you're taking classes about bunny care. Where are you doing this?
Right.
And what is Outschool?
Right.
So Outschool is an online platform where you can sign up for one class, weekly classes, bi-weekly classes, a semester-long classes, whatever they offer for all different types of things. It could be for academic subjects like math and science and things like that, but also it could be for bunny care, for example. Yep. My daughters right now are doing an ongoing zoo vet club.
That's cute.
And so they have patients that they look at and they learn about the animal and they learn why they're a patient and what's wrong with them. And it's a live Zoom with a teacher
so cool.
Or someone in that field. So it'd be like you teaching dance.
Right.
So they have dance classes, gaming classes, Minecraft and Fortnite and whatever, escape rooms, singing, history classes, writing classes. There's even Harry Potter classes. You can look up Barbie classes.
Right. Pokemon.
Yeah, so many things. We have a friend doing a weekly art class.
Oh, cool.
And that's a big part of their day, our neighbor up the street here, because her daughter loves it so much and she's really into art. So and cool. It was just, it's less expensive.
Right.
You don't have to leave the house. And you just have to make sure you have the supplies and the list of things they say you need.
It's especially great for those parents with multiple children, and especially this mom that you were mentioning is like me and has kids very different ages. And so it's kind of nice if you can get at least one of them engaged in something that's beneficial to them while you work with the other one.
Yeah, and I always just sit in the room.
Right.
So I could be reading, I could be folding laundry, but if I'm in the room, then I know this stranger that they're talking with other kids
online,
on video,
right,
is doing what she should be doing.
Absolutely.
Or he should be doing. And so it's really neat. It's called outschool.com. And really you can search anything. And my daughter had so much fun searching the other day, all the opportunities. And then each kid has their own account basically under your account.
Sure.
And so they can save their favorites and
that's cool.
Yeah. So, awesome. And you can look for teachers that way too. If you know a certain person that they really connected with and really liked, and you can look for all of it, go through all their classes. So that is outschool.com.
Excellent.
Thanks for listening. We love your support. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, leave a rating and review to let us know how we're doing, and share our podcast with your friends who need a little community, humility, and joyful fun in homeschooling.